Good day and welcome to Westchester Talk Radio. I'm John Marino. We are WestchesterTalkRadio.com, produced by Sharc Creative. That is Sharc with a C, not a K, S-H-A-R-C, Creative. And catch all of our programming at Westchester Talk Radio and Sharc Creative on our Sharc Creative YouTube channel. Very simple, Sharc Creative YouTube. You go there and you get it all. And we are brought to you by, made possible by our good friends at Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center in Buchanan, powering Westchester right through April of 2021. Also by Lipolis Electric, don't be left in the dark. And by Hightower Westchester. At Hightower, your wealth is measured to and managed to a fiduciary standard. Also by our good friends at Michael Labriola, Landscape Design and Construction. We are joined here on Westchester Talk Radio now by Tom Abinanti. Tom Abinanti, Assemblyman, 92nd District here in Westchester. Now, that's a pretty diverse district. It runs from the southwestern portion of the county, areas like Hastings and Dobbs Ferry, into the north central portion of Westchester, Valhalla, Hawthorne, Briarcliff Manor, and every place in between along the Hudson River and inland, Irvington, Elmsford, those areas and more. Tom Abinanti, we thank you for being part of Westchester Talk Radio. Good to see you again. I know we talked in a number of venues many times through the years, and now in the Assembly in the 92nd District, you deal with the issues facing Westchester County, the state of New York, and the most important issue, I think, right now is we have what's been going on the last three and a half months with the COVID-19 pandemic, the reopening in different phases around the state. In Westchester, we are in phase 2 right now. Do you see us getting to phases 3 and maybe even phase 3, phase 4, phase 3 first, the next 2 phases quickly, or do you think this is still going to take some time?
First of all, hello, John. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. I would prefer to do this across a table from you rather than across a computer.
We do what we have to do. We have our computers on a table, so that'll have to
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And we don't need masks this way, so this is helpful.
Supposedly.
This COVID crisis has changed a lot. I think it's enlightened a lot of people to a lot of different things, some positive, some negative. I think this concept of talking across a computer is going to stick with us. This is a lot better than my picking up a telephone and you interviewing me on the radio. And it's a lot better than my driving over to where you are, because you could put on a lot of different guests and I could do a lot of different things at the same time. Unfortunately, though, it is going to have a negative impact on our economy for quite some time. I say the COVID-19 virus was the earthquake, the health earthquake. What is still to come is the financial tsunami. And that's going to hit our economy. It's going to hit our local governments. It's going to hit our state government. It's hitting our local businesses. It's hitting people in the pocketbook. And we in government have to plan to get everybody out of the way and keep them safe, and then find a way to rebuild quickly so that the economy doesn't suffer for a long time. We prepared for this in the state budget. Number one, we passed a standard budget of $176 billion. And we in the legislature pushed real hard back against the governor who wanted to cut. So we compromised. We said that we will have cuts on the horizon if necessary, but we want a regular budget out there so we have some place to start. And then we can reevaluate if we have to cut. Secondly, we gave the governor permission to spend $80 billion in addition to the $176 billion regular budget. And in that was $25 billion for health response, 60-something billion, I think it was $63 billion for unemployment insurance. Now, we haven't yet got a report on how much of that has been spent, but I do know that the governor borrowed to the full extent that we allowed him to borrow. We gave him permission to borrow $8 billion in the marketplace and $4 billion from the federal government. And then the governor on his own delayed tax deadlines. So the state is a very precarious situation. And it's having an impact. I mean, I know for a fact that OPWDD, Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, is delaying approval of spending for people, some of our most vulnerable people. Some of them were entitled to an increase because their conditions got worse. OPWDD, from what we can see, has sat on that increase, transferring monies from one place to another to accommodate COVID. They've blocked those transfers. Well, they didn't say they blocked them, but in effect, they've blocked them. They're taking a very long time to approval. So that's just one little area where it's hurting our most vulnerable. And it's going everywhere. I am the chair of the banking committee in the Assembly. I just rose to that position this year. And we've been having a series of hearings online, bringing in different parts of the community. Yesterday, we brought in people from Westchester County, and the Hispanic community is getting hit very hard. The not-for-profit community is getting hit very hard, and they're not getting the benefit of the federal monies that have been put out there for businesses. So everywhere you look, this has had an impact. My office, we've been working around the clock, literally. I mean, the office is closed, but the phones are forwarded to the home of two of my employees. And they get phone calls at 8 o'clock at night, and sometimes later. They don't answer them. And they're not supposed to answer them after 5, but it goes to a cell phone, they pick up the phone, and there's a constituent who can't access unemployment insurance. And so we have been on, the governor's office has been good about this. They have had their staff conduct a conference call every day at 5:30 for the entire Westchester delegation, all senators and assembly members. And every day we give them feedback. And for a period of time there, unemployment insurance was the main issue because people really needed it and couldn't access it because the system, I mean, they told us that in 1 month, they had 2.5 million people try to access unemployment insurance when the average for the year is 50,000 people.
Wow.
So they had to change the system. They had to constantly retool it. I think we've gotten just about everybody now. There are still some people out there, unfortunately, who still haven't gotten their benefits. But at least I think they've got the system in play. So the point I'm making is you've got a major, major impact, and that's a major crisis. Now, it's hit the most vulnerable worst. As I said, people with disabilities, senior citizens, but it's also dramatically hit our minority community. A very significant part, I think they were saying 35% of the people who got COVID were among or in our minority communities, while they make up far less of our population. So they've been hit very hard. Trying to understand why is a little more difficult. One, a lot of them are the essential workers. They are the people who are in our hospitals, who are at all ends of the spectrum. They're doctors, they're nurses, they're orderlies, they're the people who deliver in the low-paying jobs, the food that we order from the supermarket. They're working at the supermarket, and it's so but they've been hit much harder. Plus, we find in many of our minority communities a crowding situation. So it's harder for them to socially distance. But for whatever the reason is, we've got to pay some attention as to what happened here. And what we think is it's highlighted the disparity in our community, the imbalance, the racial injustice. And that's kind of fed into the Black Lives Matter movement. At the same time, we've had police officers, one right after the other, on national TV now, basically murdering Black men. And we've always had a problem. Since the beginning of this country, we've had a problem with racial inequality. But now it's really come to the fore because we have the press and people walking around with their own telephones, taking pictures of what's going on. And so that, like they say, one picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, we've had a lot of pictures, so that's many thousand words, and it's now become clear to those people who weren't watching before or didn't want to see it, that our police have misused the power and the weapons that we have given them. Now, that's not to condemn every police officer out there. Okay, there are a lot of good police officers. The vast majority are good police officers. But I think our society has failed, one, in the way we screen police officers. So we've allowed some people to get on the police forces who should not be there. Secondly, we are not giving them the mental health guidance and backup that they need. Thirdly, we have not supported the good police officers who see bad things and want to report it. And fourthly, we have not prosecuted properly. So I think we have a lot to do. And we started dealing with both of these crises in the last 6 weeks. The legislators responded. We drafted legislation. I went to Albany first on the COVID response, and we drafted a slew of legislation to try to help our homeowners, our businesses, our renters, and the governor allowed for a delay in payment of rent for those who needed it. Well, we passed some legislation requiring a forbearance of mortgages, so that at least the state banks now, their customers could, if they have to, roll over the missed payments as a balloon to the end, balloon payments at the end of the mortgage. But we still have a lot to do. I mean, we passed, like I said, a whole series of things trying to help people. I was there. I guess I was as the chair of the banking committee. There was a bill that I was dealing with, a bill from Assemblywoman Rosick from Brooklyn. The bill I just spoke about, the mortgage forbearance, she wrote it. The governor's office was not interested in dealing with it until we were about to pass it. And then they started to talk and they said, well, we should change this, we should change that. So I got involved in the negotiations. We passed the Rosick bill, then we passed an amendment to it at 2:00 in the morning on the last day of that session. And I was on the floor of the legislature. I was in Albany defending the changes that we made as a chapter amendment to the original bill. So I was one of the last people to speak because that was one of the last things we did at 2:30 in the morning. So that was that response. Then we went back last week and I spent most of the week in Albany, and we did a whole series of bills to make our law enforcement accountable. There still is more that has to be done, but it's very moving when you hear the story of Diana Richardson, who was an assemblywoman from the city, and she was out at a peaceful protest with Senator's name slips my mind right now. But black man, black woman, both of them attacked by the police for no reason at all. They were peacefully standing in a protest, probably yelling and raising their hands and whatever. But the pictures show that the police just drove their vehicle right into them and started to swing. She was on the ground getting hit, and it's very moving, and it makes you understand that when your equals tell you a story, that they are now afraid. The black men, black assembly members are afraid to go out of their homes in New York City. You understand much better than you've ever understood, because now here is your equal. This is somebody who is in the same position as you are, same power, same influence, represents the same number of people, is afraid to go out and do the job that we've been elected to do because there are police out there who they believe are going to attack them for no reason at all. So that really brings it home. Every one of us learns it in a different way. I've been to 8 rallies in my district. The response has been tremendous. And I will just say that these are very diverse rallies. People from all parts of our community are out there sending the message that we want to deal with the racial inequality. And we want our police department working for the community, not exercising, the power against the community. So those are the two things that we've really been dealing with over the last several weeks. There's still other things going on. For example, the county executive, George Latimer, who I think you had on a little while ago on your show, mentioned to me that it might be helpful to have a retirement bill, an early retirement bill, and wanted to explore the implications of that. My supervisor, Paul Feiner, said the same thing. So we took the old retirement bill from 2009 and reintroduced it to get a conversation going and saying, is this a good idea? And if so, how should we change what we did last time around? I'm working with one of the senators on one for our school systems, because that, there are a lot of, both the school systems and our local governments are going to be dramatically hit over the next few months by a loss of tax revenue. And we don't want to see people laid off. If we could find a way to have people who are close to retirement take retirement, and then the local governments and the school systems tighten their belt really, really, really tight and get by for the next few months or the next 6 months with a much smaller staff, or maybe hire some people at a much lower pay grade, and we can get by for a while. Don't pave the roads, just fill the potholes. Don't do, like just patch the roof, don't replace the roof. All of the things that maybe don't make sense normally. You're better off replacing the roof than patching it. But maybe for the next 6 months or a year, we're going to have to just patch. And so we're going to have to cut back dramatically. I've tried to get monies from the state for some of my communities. I've had several communities that need garbage trucks. And we've been able to get monies from capital funds in the state so that they can buy the needed garbage trucks. I normally would say, I don't think you should be using capital money from the state to buy a garbage truck. Okay, you should pay for that yourself. I will fight to get state money to buy a park, to get a playground, to do something like that. But in this state, at this time, we need to get money from wherever we can, and we bought several garbage trucks. I'll tell you, okay. And
they're
because
not cheap, the garbage trucks. Yeah,
exactly. That's what the community needs right now. And so we've got to all work together, whether it's on racial inequality, whether it's on responding to COVID, or whether it's on just the day-to-day things that people need. We really need to come together. I've been fortunate. I've been, as you know, been in government for quite some time. I was a town councilman in Greenberg. I was a county legislator. Now I've been an assemblyman. I'm finishing my 5th term. I've developed the relationships with all of the people in the community. So people are not afraid to call me. Some neighbors, people in other parts of town, they'll just call. Oh, I know him. I know him from wherever, just like you and I go way back, right? So you're not afraid to call up and say, hey, Tom, tomorrow you want to come on the show? I'll say, sure,
exactly.
John.
Yep.
Exactly. And so that's the way it is with the community. All of the mayors have my cell phone. I have their cell phone number. And we communicate. We talk, like, what's going on in your community? How can we help? Well, we need to have such and such done. They gave us this mandate. What does this mean? That says that we can't. One of the things I've pushed for example, is to reopen some of the summer schools. And now the governor has listened, and he's come down with he's reopening the summer school for kids with disabilities. Now that's good. That's the first start. But we have to make sure that there are other kids who've fallen through the cracks, who don't have computers at home, don't have the wherewithal to do at-home training or learning. Maybe their parents speak another language, or maybe their parents just don't have the innate temperament to teach their kids the assignments. We've got to get to those kids too. I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of bright kids out there in our area who barely need school, all right? Teachers give them an assignment, they'll go do it themselves. They finish it in half the time. At-home learning is probably not hurting them, as long as they're the type of kids who will pick up the phone and call the teacher, But you've got the kids in the middle or at the bottom end who are struggling. And it's not just kids with disability. We've got to get them back into a one-to-one relationship with teachers as soon as possible. So I've been pushing for this kind of stuff. Every day on the call, we talk, all of my assembly colleagues, we kind of take turns on issues. It's a rotation. One day, one person talks about unemployment and somebody else talks about schools. And so then we rotate, because we all have the same problem. But those are the things that are going on at the moment. I'm looking forward to getting back to some of the other things. We're still in a climate crisis, and we can't forget that. Some people may think it's gone away because the air is clearer because people aren't driving. Well, we still have climate change, and it's still having a dramatic impact, and we've got to deal with that. So we in the legislature passed some of the best goals in the country. The governor came up with a plan. We amended it a little bit, but we're on the same page. We want to make sure New York is a climate leader, doing all of the right things. But that's got to be put into effect. And that's going to be very difficult now that money is so difficult, because it's going to take some money to convert from the fossil fuel economy to a green economy. There's lots of jobs in the green economy, but you got to jumpstart it. You got to move it. You got to get people. And I think that's the way to go. That we maybe I'm hoping that the new post-COVID economy is a green economy, that this forces us to say we need different kinds of jobs that are not going to close down when there's a pandemic or a crisis, but the kinds of jobs that are going to make our environment better. And then we still have a problem with gun violence. It's not on the front page anymore, but it's happening out there. There are still
all these incidents still happen when you talk about gun violence. Every day, violent stories in the newspapers, shootings, stabbings, murders, etc. So that has not changed. It's increased in some areas, in some ways. And I know in Albany, measures were taken not too long ago for gun control measures to make those more tight, more stringent. Here in New York State. They were very stringent to begin with, and yet now it's even tougher to get a gun in this state, just the way it should be.
Well, what we did in the budget, for example, we said that people in New York have to have background checks, and why should somebody coming from another state who moves into New York have a background check that only goes back a few weeks? So if somebody who's come in from another state wants to get a gun license or purchase a gun, they have to sign a waiver so that our law enforcement can check out their backgrounds in other states to make sure that they weren't committed to a mental institution or didn't commit violent crimes. So we want to make sure that whoever in our state has a gun is not someone who will misuse that gun. And we also
talk about out-of-state people who come here from Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina. The gun laws there are totally different, and they come here, I think, not knowing the laws in this state is the part of the problem. The fact that I've always thought we need a national gun law, that what you can do in Alaska, you can't do in New York. What you can do in New York, you can't do in another state. Shouldn't that all be one, unified, so there's clarification all the way? There's no problem with that. Everybody knows no matter what state you travel to, the gun laws are the same, so watch what you do.
I agree with you. I think we should. A lot of the illegal guns that are in New York come from other states. There are some states, I think South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, is the worst offender. But beyond that, I think unfortunately, the national administration is pandering to the fears, the worst fears of people, and telling them that they need to have guns. You better go out and arm yourself. When the looting begins, the shooting begins. What does that mean? Are you saying that normal citizens should start to shoot at people in the street? Is that what the message you're giving them? Responsible gun owners, and there's a lot of them out there throughout the entire country, understand the need for responsible gun laws. I mean, I passed a law in Westchester County that requires safe storage of all guns. I had the support of the gun owners in Westchester County. They didn't like the original proposal, which was gun locks, and they said, no, you need to have something where people can have gun boxes, where they can have safes. So we broadened it. We said, fine, we want a responsible gun owner to act responsibly, and we don't want irresponsible people having guns. So we worked with the responsible gun owners. As one of them said to me, he said, look, I'm a gun owner. I have a lot of guns. I have a house full of them. They're all locked away. I've got kids. I want to make sure that when my kid goes next door, there's the same safety as in my house. So the kid coming from next door comes to my house, that kid is safe. I want to make sure that my kid is safe when he or she goes next door. And that gun over there is not irresponsible because I want my kid to come back. And that's the attitude that we have to have, but that's not being promoted on a national level. And so people in other states become afraid. And they say, oh, wait a minute, New York's taking everybody's guns away. We're not taking everybody's guns away. What we're doing is saying, if somebody identifies, we have a red flag law, for example, that we passed recently, that if somebody shows signs that they are going to hurt themselves or somebody else, that somebody else could take them into court and have the judge hold a hearing. And okay, what's the evidence here? Oh, so this person is, like whatever. And so in that case, a gun can be taken away by a judge. But I think most reasonable people will agree with that and say, we don't want irresponsible people to have guns. We passed some laws dealing with domestic violence. dealing with weapons and things like that. I passed a bill that I sponsored. The governor signed it towards the end of last year, which prohibits the manufacture, possession, or sale of untraceable guns. Like those things that can be made on a 3D printer.
Right.
Why would you need one of those? If you're not with the CIA, why do you need a plastic gun?
I agree. Totally.
It's kind of like the only reason is to get by security to get into a courthouse or a public building or into an airport with a gun. Like why? Even there are no responsible gun manufacturers that use plastic parts. I checked with them. Every one of the gun manufacturers where they use plastic, make sure that there is some metal in the plastic piece, so you can't take the gun apart and slip it through the metal detectors. That's the responsible approach. So we're looking ahead a little bit here and saying you got 3D printers, you have people who can make things out of wood. So we want to make sure that it's very clear those are not legal. They don't have serial numbers. They're not detectable. The only person who would want something like that is somebody who's up to no good. But these are the kinds of things that we can't forget about while we're focusing on trying to get our economy reopened.
Westchester Assemblyman Tom Abinanti, 92nd District. Cup of Joe political show here on Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. I'm John Marino. Now, you ran down a long list of what needs to be done to get us out of this pandemic economically, to deal with social justice, to make sure that policing is done the right way. All of this, as you pointed out, takes money. That money, with all the tax money the county of Westchester, the state of New York would take in normally, is not there right now. This leads to, I think, the need for lots of federal aid.
It leads to two things. One, lots of federal aid. It's the only government that can literally and figuratively print money. We have a budget that we have to abide by. Every local government has to abide by a budget, and it has to be balanced. And that's not just a matter of law, that's a matter of common sense. There is no way that any government, any local government or even the state, could dig itself out of a hole that they create get themselves out of a hole that they dig by borrowing too much money.
And I think one thing that lots of people don't understand is that, as you pointed out, the federal government can print money. That doesn't mean they have to or are supposed to, but in situations like this, that's an advantage they have that you in Albany or in Westchester, you don't have.
And printing money doesn't necessarily have a printing press. There are ways that the Federal Reserve and whatever, it's a lot of paper stuff. But the federal government has got to help all of the states, and particularly those that are hard hit by COVID. And we were the first state. Secondly, I think we've got to help ourselves. Our tax system is not as progressive as it should be. The Assembly has passed a budget every year as a starting point, which increases taxes on people who make a lot of money. I'm not talking about our middle class people. You talk about increasing taxes. Oh my God, you're going to increase my taxes. They're too high already. No, there are people out there. The top tax rate is the same for everybody who makes more than, I think it's $1 million. We need a separate tax rate for those who make $2 million a year, $5 million a year, $10 million a year, $100 million a year. Those people will not even notice the increase in taxes. And they're still making the money now in this economy. If somebody is making $5 million this year, they can afford to pay a little bit more in taxes. And we could come in with, the numbers are staggering. I think it was like $50 billion or something over a period of time that we could bring in that way. And these people wouldn't even notice it. And you've got corporations that skirt free because that skate free rather, because of all of the tax breaks that they have. And so we've got to capture that money and help the small businesses that can't pay their rent, that help people who can't pay their mortgage, that people who can't pay their rent on their apartments. Look, the food banks are doing a great business right now. That's sad. Okay, that's really sad that we have to rely on food banks to feed people in our middle class communities. So we really need to get money from the federal government And then in addition to that, we're going to have to take another look at our tax structure. I mean, we can't continue. This highlights the impossibility of continuing to fund schools on the basis of property taxes. You know, we did allow. I was fortunate to be able to get the governor to sign a bill to allow the town of Greenburgh and all of our villages to impose a small hotel room tax. That's basically out-of-towners. And that was producing $1 million a year for the last couple of years for Greenburgh. Unfortunately, there's nobody going to hotels right now.
Right.
So, you know, once we get the economy back, that'll be very helpful because that's not property taxes. But on the other hand, right now, that's not there. It's not produced. We also gave the county of Westchester some more sales tax because we figured if people were can afford to buy stuff, they can afford to pay an extra penny on the cost of the product. But again, the sales tax is way down. So the only thing to do is go to a progressive tax, which is the income tax, get the people at the top, and get a lot of money from the federal government to get us through for the next year or two. And that's got to be the plan. I know our federal delegation, Elliot Engel, Nita Lowy, they've been pushing very hard to get money for us. But unfortunately, the Senate is in the hands of some people who don't want to help, blue states. Well, you know, we don't ask what color the state is when there is a hurricane or a tornado or something like that, or rivers overflow. The Obama administration did not hold back monies to all of those states that didn't vote for him just because they didn't vote for him. People are people no matter where they live. We've all got to be together. And we're all proud that Obama administration did provide help across the board. So now we're the ones who basically paid for all of that help because we give a lot more money in taxes to the federal government than we get back in help. Well, you know what, guys? Help us out a little bit. Let us get through the next year or two, and let's get some aid from the federal government here. We'll be glad to help you out again in 2 years. But in the meantime, we need some help. And I'm very disappointed that the Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, and his Republican leaders, I mean, I have to make this partisan, but that's the way it is, are not interested in helping out, New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, the states that were hit first with COVID. And we really led the way in how to deal with this. What I've said over and over again is, while I have been a critic of the governor on a lot of policy issues, I really compliment him for his leadership. He stepped up. He provided the leadership nationwide that should have come from the president and didn't. And I think he saved a lot of lives in New York and probably throughout the whole country, because he inspired people that there was somebody in charge, somebody was going to get it done. And people responded to that. They stayed home. They socially distanced. They closed their businesses. And they did the right thing. Now, I disagree with some of the stuff that he's done. I disagree with his reopening policies. I think, just yesterday, the other day, he said he was going to reopen visitation to people with special needs in facilities, in group homes. I think he's opening the schools a little bit too slowly. I think you've got to open the schools parallel to the way you're opening the economy. Clearly, there's got to be social distancing. There's got to be, but don't keep them closed until phase 4. Let's do it. But you know what? Those are details. We can argue over those details, and we will. But I still compliment him for his leadership, for his being out there, and for saying to people, we're all in this together. Everybody's got to wear a mask to protect themselves and everybody else. Everybody's got to socially distance. Don't reopen too soon. We don't want to have to close down again. So I think he's on the right page, and I compliment him for that, and I'll argue with him over some of the little details. But
you know, this one with the governor saying recently that, as we talk social justice too, that localities across the state have to come up soon with their own individual policing plan. He said, I can't tell New York City how to police the 5 boroughs. And if you don't do that, it might affect and maybe greatly affect the money you get from the state. Is that viable for each locality?
I think it's viable, but I think the state has to provide some help. When you're talking about a lot of local departments, okay? I got a call just the other day from one of my police chiefs saying, okay, where do I go from here? The police chief has got 20 policemen and women. Okay, what do they do differently? I was talking to another one. I went to one of the rallies and I pulled aside the police chief who was there because he doesn't have a big enough police force if he's not there. So the chief has got to be on the street. Okay, so he had men and women on the street, plain clothes, in that he plain clothes and in uniform. But he was saying, and I was asking, I said, well, when was the last time your people had training in how to deal with a protest? And he said, I can't afford to take one of my 20 police officers and one of my 22 police officers and send that person for training. It cost me $3,000 extra per day. Now, we may say $3,000. What's that? That's nothing. Well, when you're dealing with a village that has 22 police officers, and that means 2 cops on the street at night, and that's all, one in the headquarters and one in a car, that's a big drain. So
where small village, that might be like $3 million per day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So where we are right now is I think the state has to help. I think the Division of Criminal Justice Services or the state police have to help develop model responses. What is it that a police department in the suburbs should be doing to improve community relations, and how do we make things better? And then you've got to go to the rural areas where you're dealing with sheriff's departments, and they don't have a police department in every little locality. So what do we do there? How do they respond? So I think it's good that the governor is placing the responsibility on local governments because that's where the control is as well, and it should remain there. But I think the state has an obligation to help. And that means bring in the national experts. Maybe put together a panel of national experts that's available to meet with. I mean, I'd be glad to call together all of my police chiefs in my district. But you know what? I don't even have to do that because they talk to each other anyway. But I did that when we were talking about criminal justice reform. When we passed the changes to bail, and when we passed the changes to discovery in court, I met with, I had 28 people in my office. My office isn't that big, but we managed to get 28 mayors and village administrators and police chiefs in there and had a frank discussion about what was right and what was wrong. And this session in the budget, we made some changes. Not everything they wanted, because some of the things that they wanted, we just didn't think was appropriate. Some police chiefs wanted to abolish the whole reform, but we made some changes after we heard what they had to say. So we talked to them together. And I think we need to have some experts come in, talk to the chiefs, and help them fashion something that works for their community. We've been fortunate. There haven't been too many incidents in my district. There have been some, though, and one is too many. One is too many. If somebody dies because of miscommunication, or because we have a bad cop, or because of just a mistake, if something goes wrong, that's one life too many. So we really need to help them fashion something that fits the local situation. And I think that's where we're going to have to look next.
And as we talk about means of effective policing now, is this an opportunity here for police departments to learn to work together better, maybe share resources to make
I definitely think it is. Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think the county has to bring people together. I'm disappointed, for example, that we don't have widespread crisis units. When I was a county legislator, we did have a crisis unit that was a first response.
Which I remember, yes.
Yes, and I'm pushing for it on the state level, and we put a minuscule amount of money in. Basically what it is what I'm talking about, how to set one up, what kinds of people do you need in it, et cetera. But the obligation is on the locals to fund it, and that's hard to do. So those people who are saying defund the police department, many of them don't really mean defund the police department. That's a nice catchphrase. What they're saying is we got to do this differently. We've got to do this differently.
Yeah.
Right. And when somebody, when there's a call that says, as there was with Mr. Chamberlain in White Plains a few years ago, there is a distraught man who is not taking his medication. His life alert went off. Send somebody over and they send cops. And the cops yell from the other side of the door, "Are you okay?" And he says, "I'm okay." And the next thing you know, they're breaking down the door, and he's scared. He grabs a knife and a chair and doesn't know who these guys are coming in, and they kill him. They shoot him. Well, they went there to help him. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't hurting anybody. And if he was hurting himself, it certainly wasn't going to be as bad as you're killing him with a gun.
Could this have been a situation where, as we talk about now, maybe sending in a social worker instead?
Exactly. Yes, there are some places, I think Yonkers did, I don't know if it still does, I think it may, have a team of people who accompany the cops to any incident where a social worker or a psychiatrist or a psychologist might be the better response. I mean, domestic violence is a perfect example of that. That's a situation that can escalate out of control very easily, but also could be de-escalated in many situations. And you have to have somebody who's able to size up that situation and say, let me deal with this. Let me see if I can separate the two and talk to them and see if we can calm things down, and, you know, almost like a marriage counselor type. So, you know, every situation is different, but you know, every situation doesn't require the same police officer who's got to deal with a drug dealer, got to deal with a drunken person going down the street, got to deal with a domestic violence situation, got to deal with a kid with autism who doesn't understand anything, has to deal with an active shooting going on in a bank. You know, I mean, that's a lot to ask from police officers.
Right. These are all different kinds of responses that are necessary.
Exactly. And
one size does not fit all.
You're looking for somebody with a PhD in sociology there. And maybe, you know, and also somebody who's a crack shooter, and somebody who, you know, like, and who's big and has got muscle and knows karate. I mean, you're trying to put all this stuff into one person. That's not reasonable to expect that. And so I do think we have to look at different ways of policing. And I think a lot of this is going to be joint policing, as you suggested, or even countywide, where the county provides special units. I mean, they do that now. I mean, they have a bomb squad on the county level. There's a hazmat team that responds to incidents, and that's composed of local people. We have SWAT groups that come together in case of an active shooting. We have groups that deal with, all kinds of different teams.
Somebody suggested to me recently, they said, you know, all the dispatchers that work around the county, every local department from top to bottom around the county, let's have one county-wide dispatch system, let's say between midnight and 6 a.m., because the number of calls is not the same as they are during daytime, and it might save a few bucks too.
You also want somebody who has the ability to discern the difference between the different types of calls and what's the appropriate response. Because that first responder is very important, and you don't want the wrong responder. And you know, when there is a madman in his apartment calling the police department and sitting by his window, as happened in Eastchester many years ago, sitting there with several rifles picking off people, you don't want to send a social worker. Okay, somebody's got to figure out that this madman is dangerous. Okay, at the same time, when you're talking about some little old lady who's sitting in her window, as happened in Rockland County, who was really, you know, had lost it. I don't know what her condition was, but she had lost it. She doesn't have a gun. She's not dangerous. A social worker can walk in, sit down next to her and say, hey, let's talk about this for a while, and probably walk her out into a hospital somewhere. You didn't need the whole police department to surround the building. So, but that's a difficult task, and I don't think every police department can afford to hire somebody who's going to be on the 911 call, the other end, listening. That probably needs to be a countywide team of people who can evaluate what that call is all about, and then relay it back and say to the local police department, hey, look, here's the call from such and such a place. We are dispatching the crisis team. Can you send one of your cops over there to back them up? That's the way I would see this happen. And they have to know which crisis team. You know, if it's a hazmat team, you're going to need a cop to make sure that there's nobody, that it's just a spill. You know, that the truck overturned, it wasn't intentional, nobody's going to light a match. And so on the other hand, if it's just a spill, you don't need all these guys in riot gear. Don't mistake it for an intentional attack by ISIS. You know, this is This is a truck driver who made the turn too fast.
So
And
the
that's
trick
the
to
kind-
all this then, I guess, figuring out who to send in which situation, who
Exactly.
is the right person in each situation.
Yeah, exactly. Now the governor has provided monies in the past, and I think we continued it in the budget this year for sharing services. And I think that's going to become even more important as we come out of COVID. You mentioned to me, like how are we coming out of this? The problem is people are anxious to get out of solitary confinement.
Yeah, solitary confinement. Quarantine.
They were home alone or home with their family, and as much as they love their family, they want to see somebody else.
They want to go have a burger somewhere.
Exactly. And so we got to make sure at this point we don't do it too fast. And people don't understand that. There was a great analogy that I picked up off the internet and I use all the time, and that is just because your parachute has slowed your descent doesn't mean you can take it off. And that's where we're at. We're pretty close to the ground, but don't take off the parachute.
Right.
2 stories up and you jump off, you can still get killed. Yes, you were up there in the clouds, but now, you know what? Now we bailed out of the airplane. You floated down through the clouds. You went past the top of the Empire State Building, which is still 2 stories up. That's not a safe place to take off the parachute and jump.
Or some people say, why did I do it? Because I can. Well, you can do a lot of things, but the real question is, what should you do in this situation?
Exactly.
And I think I agree with you totally that we can't do this too fast. We'll be back to square one or even worse.
Correct. And I'm a little troubled by some of the rallies that I've gone to. I've gone to like 8 rallies for Black Lives Matter. And, there were some where people were 6-8 feet apart. There were others, basically younger people, who were pressed up against each other. They hadn't seen their friends in a long time. Well, this was great. They were yelling and screaming and for a good cause. But guys, separate,
Right.
Separate. You got an entire street here. You don't have to all be standing right here. Separate. And when
I
you
saw
try
something
to
in
tell
the
them
village
that,
a few
you get
days
angry.
ago. A young guy on the street said, well, I don't really think it affects me too much, and I can manage my space a certain way. Everybody should be able to manage their own space their own way, and we can avoid a catastrophe happening. And it doesn't really work like that. You do have to think about other people.
Correct. That is correct.
Tom Abinanti, Westchester Assemblyman, 92nd District. His district runs from the southwest corner of the county, from Hastings, Ardsley, Dobbs Ferry, up the Hudson, Irvington, cuts into Elmsford and Tarrytown along the Hudson as well, and over to Valhalla and Hawthorne, Briarcliff Manor. Pretty wide swath of the county there, Tom Abinanti.
Are you going to have Pleasantville? We even
What's that?
have Pleasantville and a little piece of the
Pleasantville is in there
Chappaqua
too, of
School
course.
District.
I know I didn't hit them all. So Greenberg, town of Greenberg, everything in there. Elmsford, part of that as well. So you got a pretty wide swath of the county there. And during your years on the county board, you were in the Elmsford area. That expanded a bit with your years now up in Albany in the Assembly. Again, 92nd District. Tom Abinanti, we've spoken in a number of venues for many, many years, for decades. Great to have you with us here on Westchester Talk Radio, Cup of Joe Political Show. I know you're busy up in Albany, so I'll let you get back to work, but let's do this again real soon, okay?
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you, Tom. And we are Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. Cup of Joe Political Show. I'm John Marino, and we are produced by Sharc Creative. That is Sharc with a C, not a K, S-H-A-R-C, Creative, and brought to you by, made possible by our good friends at Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center in Buchanan. They promise to power us in Westchester right through April of 2021. Our good friends at White Plains Hospital, our thanks to everybody on the front lines throughout the course of the pandemic and beyond. Wartburg Healthcare and Rehabilitation in Mount Vernon, Park Sterling Realty, and also Michael Labriola, Landscape Design and Construction. We thank you one and all. We thank you, Tom Abinanti, and we are Westchester Talk Radio. All of our programming available on YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative YouTube. It's that simple. WestchesterTalkRadio.com.